What was supposed to be a celebration of Alex Eala's growing popularity in Canada quickly turned into a controversy after a CBC News segment mistakenly referred to the Filipino tennis star as an American of Filipino origin. The error triggered criticism from Filipino viewers online, who pointed out that Alex Eala is not American. She is a Filipina athlete who represents the Philippines on the international tennis stage. The discussion took place during a CBC News interview about the excitement surrounding Alex Eala at the National Bank Open in Toronto. The guest was Abby Albino, a tennis fan and co-founder of Rise Tribe, an organization that supports and connects Filipino Canadians. The segment began on a positive note. Albino described the atmosphere at the tournament as something that felt almost like Manila. She talked about the Filipino fans, the familiar sounds and energy inside the venue, and the way the community gathered to support Alex Eala. But in the middle of that conversation, the anchor introduced Alex with a completely inaccurate description. Now, Alex Eala is an American of Filipino origin. She's not a Canadian. So why is she getting all this attention, do you think? That statement immediately caught the attention of viewers. For many Filipinos, this was not simply a minor mistake involving one word. Nationality is an important part of Alex Eala's identity, especially because her rise has become a source of pride for millions of people in the Philippines and for Filipino communities around the world. Alexandra Maniego Eala was born in Quezon City, Philippines, and competes internationally for the Philippines. The official Women's Tennis Association profile lists Quezon City as her birthplace. Her success has helped place Philippine tennis on the global map, making her identity as a Filipina athlete an essential part of her story at tennis. That is why the wording used during the CBC broadcast was immediately questioned. Alex was not being discussed as an American athlete with Filipino roots. She was being discussed as a Filipino tennis player whose growing popularity had brought thousands of Filipinos together in Toronto. And that difference matters. Alex Eala's presence at the National Bank Open was significant because she represented something much bigger than one player competing in one tournament. She represented the Philippines in a sport where the country has historically received limited international attention. When Filipino fans filled the stands, waved Philippine flags, and cheered for her every point, they were not supporting Alex merely because of her heritage. They were supporting her as their national representative. She is a Filipina athlete who trained, competed, and built her career while carrying the Philippine flag. That is the reason the mistake felt especially frustrating to many viewers. A celebration that took an unexpected turn. The CBC segment was designed to highlight the growing interest in tennis among Filipino Canadians. Albino spoke about seeing young Filipino girls dressed like Alex Eala at the tournament. She described the moment as special because these young fans now had an athlete they could admire and look up to. She also compared the moment to the way previous generations admired sports icons such as Vince Carter. For today's young Filipino fans, Albino said, this could be the Alex Eala era. That message was powerful. Alex has become a role model not only because of her results, but also because of what her journey represents. She has shown young Filipinos that they can dream beyond the usual sporting paths. She has made tennis feel more visible, more accessible, and more meaningful to a community that may not always see itself represented in the sport. The CBC report also mentioned Leylah Fernandez, the Canadian tennis star of Filipino and Ecuadorian heritage. Fernandez has long been embraced by Filipino Canadians, and having both Fernandez and Eala competing at the same tournament created a special atmosphere in Toronto. For the Filipino community, it was a rare opportunity to see two players with Filipino connections competing on one of tennis's biggest stages in Canada. But there is an important distinction between the two athletes. Leylah Fernandez represents Canada. Alex Eala represents the Philippines. Both players are admired by Filipinos, but their sporting identities are not the same. That distinction should have been clear in a segment specifically discussing Eala and her connection to the Filipino community. Instead, the anchor's mistake created confusion during a broadcast that was supposed to explain why Filipinos were supporting Alex so passionately. Why the mistake sparked backlash. Online reactions focused on two main issues. First, viewers criticized the broadcaster for failing to verify Alex Eala's nationality before discussing her on air. Second, some viewers questioned why the guest did not immediately correct the statement. The criticism directed at the guest was not necessarily because Albino disagreed with Alex's identity. In fact, her answer clearly praised Eala's representation of the Philippines. Albino said Alex made Filipinos proud, spoke the language, and served as an iconic representation of the community. However, the incorrect description remained unchallenged in that moment. For viewers watching at home, that created an uncomfortable contradiction. The anchor introduced Alex incorrectly, while the guest continued explaining why Filipinos were rallying behind her. Some viewers believed the mistake should have been corrected immediately, especially because the interview was being watched by members of the Filipino diaspora, who understood exactly why Eala's nationality mattered. It is also possible that the moment happened quickly and that the guest simply focused on answering the larger question. Live interviews are unpredictable, and people do not always process an inaccurate statement in real time. Still, the reaction from viewers shows how seriously Filipinos take the correct recognition of their athletes. For years, Filipino sports fans have watched international media overlook, misidentify, or simplify Filipino athletes. Sometimes athletes are described only through their foreign training, foreign opponents, or foreign tournaments. Other times, their Filipino identity is treated as a background detail rather than an essential part of their story. Alex Eala's rise has challenged that pattern. She is now one of the most recognizable Filipino athletes in the world. Her victories have created interest in Philippine tennis, inspired young players, and attracted global attention to a country that has rarely been associated with elite professional tennis. So when a major broadcaster described her as American, viewers reacted strongly because they felt that the mistake erased the very identity that made the story meaningful. Alex Eala's historic rise. The timing of the CBC segment made the error even more noticeable. Alex arrived in Toronto after an extraordinary run in North America. She recently won her first WTA singles title at the Mubadala DC Open, becoming the first tennis player from the Philippines to win a WTA title at CBC. That victory was not just a personal milestone. It was a historic achievement for Philippine tennis. She then carried that momentum into the National Bank Open. In Toronto, Eala defeated American player Alicia Parks, 6-1, 4-6, 6-2, to advance further in the tournament. She later reached the round of 16 before her run ended against Switzerland's Belinda Bencic. +1. Every match attracted attention from Filipino fans. The crowd support was visible and emotional. Philippine flags appeared in the stands. Fans shouted her name. Young spectators watched closely as Eala battled through long rallies and difficult moments. For many people in the audience, this was more than a tennis match. It was a chance to see a Filipino athlete make history in person. That is also why the CBC interview was important. It could have introduced Alex Eala to a wider Canadian audience while properly explaining her connection to the Philippines and to the Filipino diaspora. Instead, one inaccurate sentence became the most discussed part of the segment. CBC issues a correction. After the clip circulated online, CBC News added a correction to the video. The correction stated that at the 38-second mark, the program had incorrectly referred to Alexandra Eala as American and clarified that she is Filipino. That correction was welcomed by viewers who wanted the record set straight. It also demonstrated the importance of correcting factual errors, especially when they involve a person's nationality and public identity. A correction does not erase the original mistake, but it does acknowledge the problem and provide accurate information to anyone who watches the video afterward. In the age of social media, broadcast mistakes can spread quickly. A single sentence from a television interview can be clipped, reposted, translated, and discussed by thousands of people within hours. That means accuracy matters not only during the original broadcast, but also in the way the content remains available online. The CBC correction helped clarify that Alex Eala is Filipino. But the controversy continued because many viewers believed the error should never have happened in the first place. A major news organization is expected to verify basic information before placing an athlete at the center of a national interest story. In Alex's case, her nationality is not difficult to confirm. It is included in her official player profile, tournament materials, and countless reports about her historic achievements. The mistake may have been accidental, but its impact was real. More than a label. For some viewers, the controversy may appear excessive. After all, the broadcaster eventually corrected the mistake, and there was no indication that the comment was intended as an insult. But the reaction is easier to understand when Alex Eala's journey is placed in context. She is not simply a tennis player with Filipino ancestry. She is a Filipino athlete who represents the Philippines. That is the reason fans in Manila, Quezon City, Cebu, Toronto, and Filipino communities across the world feel connected to her success. When Alex wins, many Filipinos see a reflection of their own hopes and possibilities. Her achievements tell young Filipino athletes that international success is possible. Her presence shows that the Philippines can produce players capable of competing against the best in the world. And her popularity proves that Filipinos will support their athletes deeply when they see someone carrying the national identity with pride. During the Toronto tournament, the Filipino community did not gather merely because Alex had Filipino roots. They gathered because she was their representative. That distinction is the heart of the controversy. Alex Eala does not need to be American to be admired by Filipino Canadians. She does not need to be Canadian to receive attention in Toronto. She earned that attention through her tennis, her historic title, her courage under pressure, and the identity she proudly carries. The crowd support demonstrated that national pride can travel across borders. A Filipino athlete can play in Canada, train in Spain, compete against athletes from the United States and Europe, and still make people back home feel represented. In fact, that international journey is part of what makes Alex's story so inspiring. The bigger lesson for sports media. This incident also raises a broader question about how international sports media covers athletes from countries that are less visible in a particular sport. When an athlete comes from a nation without a long-established tennis tradition, journalists have a responsibility to provide accurate context. They should explain where the athlete comes from, what the achievement means in that country, and why fans are emotionally invested. Calling Alex Eala American changes the context of the story. It turns a historic Filipino success into something else. It risks making viewers believe that the excitement comes from a different national connection. It also overlooks the significance of a Filipino player breaking barriers in professional tennis. Good sports journalism should not only report the result, it should explain the meaning behind the result. In Alex Eala's case, the meaning is clear. She is part of a new chapter in Philippine sports. Her achievements are helping a generation of Filipino fans see tennis differently. Her matches have brought communities together, both in the Philippines and overseas. That story deserves precision. Alex's identity remains clear. Despite the mistake, Alex Eala's identity has never been unclear to the people who support her. She is Filipino. She represents the Philippines. And she has earned her place among the country's most important emerging sports figures. The CBC correction has now clarified the error, but the online backlash served as a reminder that representation must be handled carefully. For Filipino fans, recognizing Alex correctly is not about being overly sensitive. It is about giving credit where credit is due. The Canadian broadcast may have made one inaccurate statement, but Alex's achievements tell the real story. She is the Filipina tennis star who made history by winning a WTA title. She is the athlete who drew Filipino crowds to the National Bank Open. She is the player who inspired young fans to pick up a racket and imagine themselves on a global court. And she is the reason Filipinos around the world continue to watch, celebrate, and stand behind her. So yes, the mistake was corrected. But the message from Filipino fans remains clear. Before talking about Alex Eala, get her identity right. Because Alex Eala is not an American of Filipino origin. She is a Filipina tennis player, a Philippine representative, and a rising global star whose name is now proudly connected to the country she carries every time she steps onto the court.